What's up, everyone? Beastmoon expert Gladrocker back at it again with a brand new video. I'm sure all of you are wondering, what form do I want nerfed next? But we're not talking about nerfs today, even though I have this brand new poster, which is pretty amazing. But today, we're not talking about nerfs. No, we're not. We're talking about glitches, and there's one glitch in particular that I want to cover, the AoE glitch. This was introduced in May 2022. It was the most recent Beastmoon hunt as of the time I'm recording this, and it affects a bunch of different AoE spells. I don't know how many confirmed cases there are. I know it's upwards of 10 to 15. It affects forms like Death Drake, Life Elf, Myth Drake, Myth Pig, and so many more. And I'll show you exactly how this works with a bunch of examples. And before all of you abusers run over to exploit this AoE glitch in the next Beastmoon hunt, be assured that the KI team has been made aware multiple times about the existence of this bug, and it's been confirmed that they're working as fast as they can to resolve it. So none of you will be able to exploit this in the next Beastmoon hunt in June. And hopefully it'll be resolved by the next Beastmoon Mayhem. But you know, if it's not resolved by then, it's not the worst thing in the world because it does so much damage. I'm just kidding. Don't actually abuse bugs. Don't abuse bugs. Don't be bad. Come on, be smart. I bet you're all wondering, what is this AoE glitch and how does it work? But before we cover the glitch, we gotta talk about just AoE spells in general with conditional effects. Alright, so here's what I believe is happening in the game's code for AoE spells with conditional effects. What the game's gonna do is go target by target, because you're hitting all enemies, right? It's gonna start with the first target and check to see, does the condition pass? If the condition does not pass on that first target, it's going to apply the main effect of the spell to that target. If the condition does pass on that first target, it's gonna apply the main effect and the secondary effect to the first target. Then it's going to hop over to the second target. It's going to check to see if the condition passes on the second target. If the condition does not pass on the second target, it'll only apply the main effect of that spell to the second target. And if the condition does pass on that second target, it'll apply the main effect and the secondary effect to that second target, and so on and so forth until all four targets have been checked, assuming you're in a 4v4, right? The AoE glitch is making it so the AoE spell applies all main effects and all potential secondary effects to all enemies. And that sounds a little complicated, but what that means is the game will check the first enemy of an AoE glitched spell and check to see if the condition passes. If the condition does not pass on that first enemy, it'll not just apply the main effect to that single enemy before moving on to the next enemies, it'll apply that main effect to all enemies. And if the condition does pass on that first enemy, it'll apply the main effect and the secondary effect to all enemies. And it'll keep going. So it'll go to the second enemy and check to see, does the condition pass or not? If the condition does not pass on that second enemy, it'll apply the main condition to all enemies again. And if the condition does pass on the second enemy, it'll apply the main effect and the secondary effect to all enemies. And it'll keep going down the cycle. So worst case scenario, in a spiral 4v4 fight, you can have up to 4 main effects of a single spell applied to all enemies and 4 potential secondary conditional effects to all enemies. That is crazy. Take the Death Drake, for instance. It's 5 pip AoE hit, terminal illness, deals a 300 dot to all enemies, and a potential 200 dot to all enemies if the condition passes, and that's if the enemy has a heal over time. So, this is a perfect example of an AoE glitch spell. Because of the AoE glitch, in a spiral 4v4 fight where all enemies have a heal over time on them, you're dealing 4 300 dots and 4 200 dots to all enemies. That is crazy. That's obscene damage. That's 300 times 4, which is 1,200, plus 200 times 4, which is 800. And that totals to 2,000. So you're dealing 2,000 damage over 4 rounds to all enemies. That's 500 a round. And to put that in perspective, that's the total health of an ice croc. So you're just killing an ice croc, per se, for 4 rounds straight. You're killing 4 ice crocs. And you're also removing the heal over time. That's obscene damage. That is crazy. It's hard to even fathom how much damage that is on all enemies for just 5 pips. But you don't have to imagine it because it's happened so many times already in May 2022 hunt. So many people are abusing this AoE glitch. And the biggest culprits of this past hunt were Death Drake and Life Elf. And I think it's because those forms were free to use. They were free, they were unlockable, so randoms could use them if they wanted, as opposed to other forms which are also bugged, but you know, you have to have the idols to use those. Okay, so I actually captured footage on a bunch of examples of this AoE glitch. And not just examples where the AoE glitch applies, but also some examples where the AoE glitch does not apply. And I'll go through them all with you right now. Okay, so first up we got the Death Drake. This was the biggest culprit. Most people were abusing this one in the previous hunt. This is the Terminal Illness spell. It is a 5-pip AoE hit, and as you can see, it deals 300 damage to all enemies, clears a heal over time for an additional 200 damage to all enemies. But because of the AoE glitch, there's 3 enemies that are live on the other side, so it's dealing 3 dots of 300 damage to all enemies. And because the Storm Elf had a heal over time, it's dealing an additional 200 dot to all enemies. That's nuts. As you can see, it put 4 dots on all enemies, 3 of which were 300, 1 was 200. Storm Elf dies immediately because it's a small form, it's weak, and the Death Fairy is not going to hang on much longer. These small forms do not last long while this AoE glitch is in effect. Check out the Death Fairy. It's going to die right now. Just watch. 50, 75, 75, and then it would do another 75, but it died. It's gone. So next up is the Life Elf. Check it out. Its 5-pip AoE spell is currently bugged. Look at the animation. It's really wonky too. As you can see, normally it just deals a 225 dot to all enemies, but because there's 3 enemies, it's dealing 3 225 dots to all enemies. And of course, if we were in Spiral, if this was a 4v4, it would deal 4 damage over times to all enemies. So it's pretty nuts, pretty crazy, obscene damage, especially from a Life Elf. And again, these small forms are not gonna last that long. Alright, so the Myth Drake is crazy. Its 5-pip AoE spell normally deals 300 damage to all enemies, but because of the AoE glitch, it'll deal 300 times the number of enemies that are alive on the opponent's side. And since there's 2, the Storm Rat and the Death Drake, it's dealing 300 twice. Even more than that, because it's a Death Drake and a boost, it's doing 325 twice. So 325 times 2 is 650. It literally just one shot of the Death Drake. It dealt 650 damage for 5 pips on that Death Drake. That's crazy. That's crazy. So the Death Cyclops is also bugged here. As you can see, one of its 5-pip AoE spells deals 125 damage up front to all enemies, but because of the AoE glitch, it's going to deal 125 times 2, so that's 250 to all enemies, right? Because there's 2 alive enemies right now. That's pretty high damage for a Death Cyclops. Up next, we have the Myth Pig. It should deal 250 damage to all enemies for 5 pips. But it's going to be bugged here because the AoE glitch. And as you can see, animation's really wonky on this one. Even though the Balanced Cyclops is about to cast, you still see the bubbles on the opponents, which is kind of funny. And the damage doesn't show immediately either. The damage shows now as the Balanced Cyclops is casting. And for some reason, it's not doing 250 twice. It's doing 200 and 125. I don't know what's going on with this one, but it's clearly bugged, okay? So there you go. That's the point. It's bugged. Okay, so the Storm Elf is super bugged here. Its 5-pip AoE spell should deal 250 damage to all enemies and clear a damage over time to everyone on your side for a pip. However, notice the damage is not bugged on this one, but it's the conditional effect that is. See, the Death Drake and the Balance Fairy both had a dot on them. So, for some reason, everyone gets a pip. Everyone. The Storm Elf got a pip, Death Drake got a pip, Balance Fairy got a pip. And that's not all. The Balance Fairy had another dot on it, so everyone gets a pip again. The Storm Elf gets a pip, the Death Drake gets a pip, and the Balance Fairy gets another pip. So that's 2 pips to everyone on their side. The Death Rat's AoE trap is also bugged, but it's not the trap itself that's bugged, it's the secondary conditional effect that's bugged. The 50 weakness gets cast 3 separate times on all 3 enemies. Okay, so for the Fire Cyclops, it's the 3-pip AoE mantle spell that's bugged. As you can see, for 3 pips, you're casting 3 mantles on all 3 enemies. And again, if this was a Spiral fight and it was a 4v4, you'd be casting 4 mantles on all 4 enemies. So that's pretty crazy. It's pretty toxic, right? That's a lot of mantles. Alright, so I got some examples here of spells that are not bugged by this AoE glitch. The first example is the Death Pig's Death Bat AoE spell for 5 pips. It does what it's supposed to do, and I believe it's because this is not a conditional AoE. This is an AoE hit that has a secondary effect that always happens. There's no condition whatsoever. It does what it's supposed to do. Up next, we have the Fire Minotaur. This is the 5-pip AoE hit. This one is a conditional, so I don't know necessarily why this is not bugged. I feel like this should be bugged by the AoE glitch, but it's not. It deals its damage to all 4 enemies, as it's supposed to, without dealing damage 4 times per enemy, right? Up next, we have the Life Drake. This AoE spell is also not bugged by the AoE glitch. As you can see, it does its main effect here, 200 to all enemies, and it also casts the conditional second damage over time to all enemies as well. So check that out, not bugged at all. It does each thing individually to each enemy. Alright, so up next we have the Ice Minotaur. Its 5-pip AoE hit is not bugged at all. It does damage to each enemy individually, and it doesn't repeat the damage. Last but not least, we have the Fire Elf's Fire Giant spell. This is not bugged either. It does the main effect, the big hit on each enemy, only once, and it also casts the conditional effect, the shield removal, and additional damage over time, only once per enemy. So it's not bugged at all, as you can see. And I'm sure there's plenty other examples of spells that are bugged by the AoE glitch, but those were the ones that I personally was able to catch footage of. If I had more time, I would experiment with every single spell, but unfortunately, Beastmoon Hunt's temporary, so until it becomes permanent, gotta make do with what we have. And again, you won't be able to exploit this, because the devs are already fixing it. Thank God. This was a messy hunt. Alright? And just in general, don't like abuse bugs. Who does that? What kind of person exploits and abuses bugs? Don't be that person. Don't be bad, okay? Don't exploit things. It's not good. But that's all I have for you in this video. I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care. Peace.